Hello everybody, it's Root Beer. Atlas had a family emergency come up, so no podcast this week, which means it's time for the Root Beer News Corner again, and I don't have my camera on today because I don't feel like untangling all the wires on my desk to plug it in. Let's get started. We're gonna cover some of the recent lyrical reveals. First up, we had Pacifica last Tuesday, so... First up, we have Planet Idol Pacifica. Thank God, they gave us a new name. So continuous center back row circle during your turn. If you have Vanguard with Pacifica in its name, it can attack from back row, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets 10k. And then at the end of the battle attacks, if you have Vanguard with Pacifica, put this unit into the soul, choose one of your units, give it 5k, and if it was put from center back row, draw a card. So, this is pretty good. In the context of Standard, it's a way for you to get an additional attack, it boosts up your other units, but in the context of Premium, this replaces one of the old grade 3s that were still like 11ks. For some reason, the V version of Pacifica was like, yeah, if you have X number of Pacifica names, do this, and then they never printed any more Pacifica names, so... Finally, we have new ones for Premium! And then you have your starter, does typical starter things. It's not Shizuku, which deeply upsets me. And then we have the D version of Top Idol Pacifica. So, Vanguard, act once per turn, counterblast 1, put a card from hand to bottom of your deck, draw 2. And then when it attacks a Vanguard, counterblast, soul blast a card with Pacifica in its name, search your deck for any normal unit, call to an open rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So... putting these two Pacificas together, it's pretty obvious, like, what the plan is for Standard, so... You know, you attack with the Pacifica, goes into Soul, you give something 5k, then you attack with the Top Idol Pacifica, you can search out another Planet Idol from your deck, or just anything. But, you know, since it needs to be open rearguard circle, most likely Planet Idol, and then you get a 5th attack out of that. The nice thing is, because Eureka exists, you have ways to, like, bounce cards back to your hand during the battle phase and open up more circles so that you can actually just make 5 attacks without having to go through all of your Planet Idols. This also means it's not necessarily the end of the world when you draw them. Like, it seems like that first act ability is if you draw too many Planet Idols, you can put them back in your deck to call them out later. So, it is a nice way to kind of cycle your hand for things that you want back in your deck, and then you can kind of dig deeper for cards you actually want. Next, we have Voice of Inspiration Ruizin. So, at the end of the battle, it boosted, you can retire it, choose up to 2 cards with Pacifica in their name from their drop, return to your deck, and if 2 cards were chosen, you can countercharge 1. This is pretty nice. You do counterblast a decent amount, you have to do it for the act ability, you have to do it for the extra attack, and then there's a grade 2 that also counterblasts. It's also just a way for you to put Planet Idol back into the deck, which you're going to need to do because you only have 4 of them. Revival Ocean Solange. So, when it's placed on rearguard circle, counterblast 1, look at top 7, choose a card with Pacifica in its name from among them, reveal it, add to hand. If no cards were revealed, you countercharge 1. The best kind of searcher, the one that just gives you the counterblast back if you whiff. And then when your other unit attacks from back row center, it gets 5k. So if you do double Planet Idol, it'll gain 10k, going up to 20 or 30 EK, depending on persona ride turn. Pretty decent searcher. Let's see. We have the grade 2 for the ride line. So it's rode upon by a grade 3 Pacifica. Choose one of your Vanguards until end of turn. Reduce the cost of the original act ability by counterblast 1. So, nice way to help manage your counterblast. You're not always going to have 2 Pacificas in your drop zone to be able to get this countercharge off of the grade 1, so having that early opportunity to just draw 2 and cycle a card for free is really nice. And then, to the front lines, Bernarda. So, when the attack that it boosted hits, you can look at top 7 for a Pacifica, reveal it, add it to your hand. If you reveal a card, you bottom deck this unit. Seems kind of whatever. Like, you already have more effective searcher, and then, you know, Top Idol can just search Eternal Idol out of the deck if you need it, so I feel like this is probably the least important one. It doesn't even recycle your Pacificas, which is something that the other grade 1 does, which is kind of something the deck needs. This one seems kind of superfluous, like they just needed an extra card there. And then finally, Spirited Diva Anase. When it's rode upon, look at top 7, choose up to 2 cards with Pacifica in their card name among them, reveal it, add to your hand, shuffle your deck. So, pretty good, just searches out your Pacificas. You probably do want to draw at least one Planet Idol early, just so you can, like, put it down, get that fourth attack going. And it also helps you just search out your Persona rides. I do wish these cards were a little more consistent, or I wish that these cards existed in, like, Premium with the ride deck, so that I don't have to try and, like, find something to ride in Premium. I can just ride this, try to get up to 2 Pacificas in Premium, but whatever. Did that sentence make sense? I feel like that sentence makes sense. Maybe I'll just record it again. Probably not, though, because I'm feeling lazy today. But yeah. All of the Pacifica cards seem decent. I think, for me, I'm looking more at Premium for once. You know, my biggest problem with Premium is just that, like, nothing I want to play is relevant, so finally, we are getting, like, some of the cards that I actually like in Premium again. So having another name that actually does something is huge, right? Being able to attack from back row especially means that, like, if you're going first and you're using the V version of Top Idol, like, you can have your 2 Pacificas in the front row and then this in the back row. You make 2 additional force markers, so you can just be like, all right, you know, there's like 23, 23, 23, and you have like triple door, and you have the extra like power and drive on the Top Idol. Like, that does so much, and even in later turns off of things like Heltrauda or Fantastic Passion, just being able to put this in the back row center and have it be at like plus 25 is insane, right? D Top Idol, not the best. Like, obviously you would prefer the V version just to get like those force markers going, and I do think like riding up to grade 3, you just want to be able to make those extra force markers. I'm thinking maybe doing like a 3-1 split where you play like one of this. You have a decent ability to just search out whatever Pacifica you want. So, like, I'm envisioning a world where you like search this out, you ride it, and then you go into Heltrauda. So, like, if you can't fulfill the conditions for Fantastic Passion of needing all 3 names for whatever reason, like, this is an alternative play you can do that will still net you, like, 7, 8 attacks, maybe? No, 7. Like, you don't really have a way to extend past that, I don't think. Wait, so, I guess in a world where it's like, okay, you have Planet Idol in the back row, and then 2 front row, that's 3 attacks, Heltrauda is 4, then you rewrite into this, call 2 more things. So that's like... So this is like 5, then you call the 2 things from hand, 6, 7, and then you can call 1 more thing to an open circle, which is probably another Planet Idol for 8. So yeah, I think if the stars align and you have like a Planet Idol, like you're on this, and then you stride into Heltrauda, you can end up with 8 attacks in Premium. Like, I don't know how, like, great this deck will be in Premium. Like, you are still playing with a ton of grade 3s in your hand, so it's a case of, like, I have 12 cards and half of them don't have shield. But, you know, it's something to think about. It's something for me to cook. And we're gonna get Prisms on Tuesday from the time of this recording, so hopefully those Prism cards are good, and I can cope on my other favorite archetype from back in the day. But yeah, in D-Series, this seems decent. Like, you can make 5 attacks somewhat consistently, but aside from that, it's like, your numbers are medium, your hand size is medium. The deck seems merely competent in a world where the top decks are things like, you know, Youthberg, Leonore, Bastion that are just insane, right? Like, I don't know that it stands up to that kind of top meta from my initial testing, but who knows, maybe I just don't have the right build yet. And then moving on to the very, like, cool and interesting one, we have Siana, the, like, Gorgon archetype. And I hate it that our bot puts everything, like, out of order, so I have to kind of jump around, but yeah. First off, can we just stop and appreciate how cute her little baggie that she has over her head is? Like, look at this. It's so cute. Like, look, it's all upsetty because she's trying to, like, pick out clothes right now. Like, it's so cute. Let's see. So, they all kind of have the same basic ability. So, at the end of the battle that it's attacked by a rear guard, if you didn't put anything onto the guard circle during that battle, your opponent either discards a card from their hand or binds the rear guard that attacks. So, this is really neat, you know? early pressure is something that kind of separates some of the stronger decks from the weaker ones, just being able to like commit early and start swinging. You know, as decks get more and more aggressive, if you can just pile on the damage early and then follow it up with your big grade 3 turn, that can really just put you out of the game. So this is really nice, being able to like punish early aggression a little bit. Either they have to bind the card or they discard something if that card they called early on was like actually important. It doesn't do as well against the decks that are just like, oh yeah, when you ride, just call a card for no reason. Or, you know, you have things like the Jewel ride line where the grade 1 like pops itself back into soul where it just goes away. So like binding it doesn't, or this effect doesn't matter because they can just dodge the bind, right? So they don't have to bother discarding anything. But other than that, it's neat. It also just like draws you a card when you ride to grade 2, return front row rear guards to their hand, which doesn't super matter all that much. It feels like that's just there to be there, but yeah. Anyways, the grade 2, same thing. Like when it's attacked, if no cards are put to the guard circle, your opponent either discards or you bind the rear guard that attacked. And then when it's rode by a grade 3, you can choose a trigger unit or a blitz order from drop zone, put it to your hand. I'm glad that Bushiroad recognizes that like blitz orders are a really good way to support this. You know, because blitz orders don't go to the guard circle, you can activate them, get that little defensive boost, and then still activate the condition for the bind or discard. And then finally, grade 3, Gorgon Eyes. Also, look at her. She's so happy. She's eating ice cream. It's so cute. Anyways, Gorgon Eyes Siana, the grade 3. If the total number of units on your opponent's front row and guard circle is 2 or less, it gets crit +1, drive +1. When it is attacked, you put a trigger unit from hand into soul, it gets 15k, and then it has the same defensive ability where attacked by a rear guard, no cards on guard circle, your opponent either discards or binds the rear guard that attacked. So this is pretty neat. Like, I really like the concept of this. Putting a trigger from hand to soul to get the 15k power to kind of play with that no cards on guard circle. It really helps you to upcycle draw triggers, going from 5k to 15, or even just 10k to 15. Like, sometimes that little bit extra really is all you needed. I do think 15k feels a little bit small, just on, like, first impression. You know, a lot of decks are reaching much bigger numbers than that. You have decks like Drejeweled and Youthberk that are casually giving, like, 15k to the front row, and then you factor in like Persona Ride, and numbers just get really huge, which is my main concern with this, is that those more powerful aggressive decks maybe just power their way through her defensive ability, and then you end up losing a bunch of cards anyways, or you have to like put a guard on the guard circle, which turns off the defensive effect. But also, you know, your opponent needs to have a clear front row for the crit and the drive, but we're going to look at the other support, which should help shore that up. So first we have a grade 1. When it's placed on rearguard circle, choose one of your opponent's front row, return it to your hand. And then when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Siana in his card name attacks or is attacked, you can put it into soul, give one of your Vanguards 10k so until end of battle. So this is a very neat and I think important piece of support. Like I just said, 15k is just kind of the standard, but you have a lot of things that are getting like plus 25k once you start Persona riding, you know, they're swinging for these like 30, 40, 50k columns, and it's like, you only have one blitz order a turn, and with only plus 15k off the defensive ability, that might not be enough. So this is a very nice addition to the strategy in that it gives you another 10,000, which I do think for a lot of things should be just enough for you to scrape by. Obviously, another factor with Siana is that you can also just take the hit. And that is another way to just kind of bypass the restriction where, you know, you get hit. Obviously, nothing was put on the guard circle, so you can either make your opponent discard or bind. And then, of course, it also returns something to your opponent's hand when placed, so you can clear out their front row, get your crit and drive very consistently. Let's see. Norsh, a grade 3, so when it attacks, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, Soul Blast 1, return all of your opponent's front row rear guards to hand, and it gets 5k. So this is nice for things like Bastion, where they have resist on all their units, so you can just get them back so you have the extra crit and the drive and kind of force that battle door if your opponent doesn't want you to start plussing. It also gains 5k, which is nice. You have Roguish Runner Juno. When it's attack, or if you have a grade 3 or greater Siana, you can Soul Blast 1 as an act ability. Choose one of your opponent's front row rear guards, return to hand. If a trigger unit was Soul Blast for the cost, you can choose one of your Vanguard, that unit, and this unit get 10k. So, another way to just kind of pressure your opponent. Obviously, they'll probably just PG it most of the time, because it does have that crit. But this is nice. And once again, returns things to the front row, so you can activate the effect more consistently. And then, finally, Jacko Parade Turretus. When it's placed on rearguard circle, return an opponent's front row to their hand. And when it attacks a Vanguard, if you have a Vanguard with Siana, not grade restricted by the way, you can counter blast 1 for each of your opponent's open front row, it gets 5k, and if it gets 10k, you draw a card. So this is something nice, like you can dump it down early, it'll be like 20k, you can draw a card, just get a bit of that early pressure going. It's also just good like late game, because again, power plus drawing. Like, I think Siana is a very interesting card. You know, we talk a lot about defensive card design with how crazy the aggression has gotten recently in D format. I know my camera's not on, but it's just like offensive power is like way up here and then defensive power is really trailing behind. They're very reluctant to give things the same kind of shield value compared to how much power things gain. So, like, again, you're having things get like 5, 10, 15k, and we're still kind of in the kiddie pool of like, oh, this can sometimes get 5 or 10k shield, right? Like those new, like, carbuncle units, the grade 1s where you put back your ride deck and gain some shield power, those are really nice. Like, a lot of people are taking in 1 or 2 copies of those into their decks, just being like, hey, you know, I have the extra slot and I need the shield value. So I think this is a really interesting and cool design. It kind of encourages thoughtful gameplay from both parties. Like, as the Siana player, you have to be mindful of your own resources, how much damage you're at, whether or not you can guard your attack. You have to keep track of, like, okay, you can only use the 1 blitz order to turn, so you have to understand the matchup, kind of know where all the big power pushes are. You know, you kind of have to learn how to minimize your damage a bit so that you have space open to just take hits to force the effect to activate, right? And as the opposing player, you know, you have to take care of your own risk assessment and be like, all right, can I afford to discard things? Is it better to, like, bind one of the rear guards instead, even if it means losing a bit of pressure? You know, can I replace the rear guard if I decide to just get rid of it? So I am cautiously optimistic for Siana. I'm a little bit concerned that, like, power might just be too big relative to being able to activate her gimmick. Like, I think ideally you should be able to do it at least twice for it to feel kind of effective. I think where it's really going to shine is against things like Bastion and Leonore that have to restand their rear guards. Not only is that giving you more opportunities to activate the defensive ability, it also means that they actually do have to think about if discarding or binding the rear guard is the correct play. You know, I think something like Youthberg, for example, that's very Vanguard focused, where your rear guards are kind of disposable, you can kind of afford to get rid of them, means that, like, in a situation where they're like, oh, I can replace this rear guard, yeah, I'll bind it. Because, you know, they just ride Youthberg Gamer Light, and it's like, alright, 15k to front row, crit, drive, you know, I get the bottom deck something so they can get rid of your 10k grade 1, like, that's... I think Youthberg is going to walk all over this, to be perfectly honest. Like, in my initial test, it seemed like Youthberg can handle, like, what Siana is dishing out. And unfortunately, because you're stuck to 3 attacks and you're only gaining power, you're not really gaining any criticals or anything, you don't have that inevitability against a deck that does not care about the gimmick. So, yeah. I think this might end up being kind of a rogue contender, where, you know, as long as you have things like Bastion and Leonore around that care about restanding their rear guards, this might be able to, like, sneak into a top cut just playing against those kinds of decks, but I think you are going to struggle more against things that don't directly restand. Either it's because of, like, Youthberg, where it's very Vanguard focused, or even things that are just like, oh, like, make an extra attack or attack from the back row, right? Or yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. If they do something like attack from the back row, like the Pacifico we just saw, also Pacifico like goes away, which is another way you can dodge it. So if you have something that like returns to your hand, goes into soul, whatever, that also dodges Siana's abilities. So decks with those capabilities I think are going to be a lot harder for Siana, just because you don't have as many opportunities to trigger the defensive skill and kind of force your opponent to discard. And if your opponent's not playing into the discard gimmick, then you're just a 3-attack deck with okay numbers, and you're not doing very much to them. So yeah, cautiously optimistic. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a top every now and then, but I'm also wouldn't be surprised if it just doesn't have an impact, right? This just seems like something where if you happen to be playing a restand heavy deck, this will be kind of a problem, kind of annoying, but otherwise, you know, it'll probably just be fine. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you all later. Bye-bye.